The gunshot echoed across Settlers Creek, Idaho, in 1879, making Jessica Vaughn flinch as she hurried home from the general store, her heart pounding against her ribs like a frightened bird. It wasn't the sound itself that terrified her. Gunfire was common enough in a frontier town, but what it represented. Another day under Sheriff Wyatt Holloway's reign of terror. Jessica clutched her parcels tighter as she quickened her pace along the dusty Main Street. At 26, she had already endured more hardship than most women twice her age. Widowed 2 years prior when influenza claimed her husband, she now ran the town's only millinery shop, supporting herself through skill and determination. Her honey blonde hair was pinned neatly beneath her bonnet, and though her blue calico dress had seen better days, she carried herself with quiet dignity. "Good afternoon, Miss Vaughn," called Mr. Peterson from his barbershop. "Beautiful day, ain't it?" She managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Indeed it is, Mr. Peterson. If only they knew. If only anyone knew what Sheriff Holloway was doing to her, the threats, the demands, the photographs he'd somehow acquired of her late husband's gambling debts. Debts she never knew existed, until Holloway had shown up at her shop 3 months ago with evidence that could destroy her standing in the community. "Pay me half your earnings each month," he'd said, tobacco juice staining his unkempt beard. "Or I'll make sure everyone knows your husband was nothing but a cheat who stole from his neighbors to cover his losses. You'll be run out of town faster than a prairie fire." Jessica rounded the corner toward her shop, the Vaughn millinery sign swinging gently in the afternoon breeze. As she approached, she noticed a stranger tying his horse to the hitching post outside, tall and broad-shouldered in a dust-covered duster coat, his Stetson pulled low over his eyes. "Afternoon, madam," he said, tipping his hat to reveal striking green eyes and a face weathered by sun and wind. "Shop still open?" "Yes, of course," Jessica replied, fumbling with her keys. "Though I don't believe we've met, Mr. Quentin Tucker," he answered, following her inside. "Just rode into town. Thought I might buy a gift for my sister back east." Jessica nodded, setting her parcels behind the counter before turning to face him properly. There was something about him that seemed both dangerous and reassuring, like a thunderstorm that brought relief after a drought. "What sort of hat does your sister prefer, Mr. Tucker?" he smiled, and fine lines appeared at the corners of his eyes. "I reckon I wouldn't know a bonnet from a bowler, madam. I'll trust your judgment." As Jessica showed him various options, she couldn't help noticing how his gaze occasionally swept the shop with a careful precision that seemed at odds with his easy manner. When the door swung open again, she stiffened, recognizing the heavy tread of Sheriff Holloway. "Miss Vaughn," the sheriff drawled, deliberately ignoring Quentin, "I'll be stopping by tomorrow for our business arrangement." Jessica's hands trembled slightly as she arranged a ribbon on a hat. "Yes, Sheriff." Holloway's eyes narrowed as he finally acknowledged Quentin. "Don't believe I've seen you before, mister." "Just passing through," Quentin replied, his posture relaxed but somehow alert, like a mountain lion at rest. "Name's Tucker." "Well, Tucker, Settlers Creek is a peaceful town. I aim to keep it that way." Holloway's hand rested meaningfully on his holster. "Wouldn't want it any other way, Sheriff," Quentin replied, his tone cordial but his eyes hard as flint. After Holloway left, an uncomfortable silence filled the shop until Quentin spoke again. "That's an interesting business arrangement you have with the law, Miss Vaughn." Jessica busied herself with straightening merchandise. "It's nothing, just taxes. Must be some mighty peculiar taxes to make a lady tremble like that." His voice was gentle, without judgment. "Mr. Tucker, I appreciate your concern, but I've seen men like him before," Quentin interrupted, his voice dropping lower. "Men who wear a badge but don't honor it." He selected a pale blue bonnet with delicate lace trim. "I'll take this one for my sister." As she wrapped his purchase, Jessica tried to dismiss his implied offer of help. She'd learned the hard way that relying on others often led to disappointment. Yet something about Quentin Tucker's steady gaze made her wonder if perhaps this time might be different. "Thank you, Mr. Tucker. I hope your sister enjoys the hat." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the wrapped package, and for the briefest moment, Jessica felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. "Miss Vaughn," he said, pausing at the door, "I'll be staying at the Golden Rail Hotel, should you ever need." Had advice. After he left, Jessica leaned against the counter, her mind racing. Who was this mysterious stranger, and why did she find herself wishing he might be the answer to her prayers? That evening, as Jessica locked up her shop, she spotted Quentin Tucker across the street, engaged in conversation with old Doc Williams. The two men appeared deep in discussion, occasionally glancing in the direction of the sheriff's office. Curious, she drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders and crossed the street. "Evening, Miss Vaughn," Doc Williams greeted her, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Was just telling Mr. Tucker here about our little town's history." "All good things, I hope," Jessica smiled, trying to appear casual while her mind churned with questions. "Mostly good," Doc replied with a meaningful look. "Though every town has its secrets, doesn't it?" Quentin's expression remained neutral, but Jessica caught a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Mr. Tucker mentioned he's passing through. What brings you to Settlers Creek specifically, sir?" "Business," he answered simply, then added, "and perhaps a bit of justice-seeking." Doc Williams cleared his throat. "Well, I should be getting back, Mrs. Carmichael's expecting her third any day now." He tipped his hat and departed, leaving Jessica alone with Quentin under the glow of a gas lamp. "Justice-seeking sounds ominous," Jessica ventured, her curiosity overriding caution. Quentin glanced around before speaking. "I'm a U.S. Marshal, Miss Vaughn, not announcing it publicly just yet." Jessica's heart skipped. "A marshal, here for the sheriff." "I can't say more," he replied, offering his arm. "May I walk you home? These streets can be dangerous after dark." She hesitated only briefly before accepting. As they strolled through the quieting town, Jessica battled with herself. If Quentin was truly investigating Holloway, perhaps she should tell him everything. Yet years of self-reliance made her hesitate. "That business arrangement the sheriff mentioned," Quentin said quietly as they approached her modest home at the edge of town. "I'd hazard it's not entirely voluntary." Jessica stopped walking, staring at the ground. "Mr. Tucker, Quentin, I don't know you. I don't know if I can trust you." "Fair enough." He reached inside his coat and produced a badge gleaming in the moonlight. "But I give you my word as a lawman and a gentleman, if Holloway is abusing his position, I will stop him." The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her composure. "He has information about my late husband. He's threatening to expose Nathan's gambling debts unless I pay him monthly." Quentin's jaw tightened. "How long?" 3 months now." She blinked back tears. "I can barely keep my shop open with what he takes." "And I'd bet you're not his only victim," Quentin muttered. "Miss Vaughn, Jessica, please." "Jessica," he amended, the name sounding like a promise on his lips. "I need evidence to bring him down. Will you help me?" She looked up at the stars scattered across the vast Idaho sky, thinking of all the nights she'd prayed for deliverance. Could this man be the answer? "Yes," she finally whispered. "I'll help." As Jessica bid Quentin good night and entered her home, she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, a dangerous, wonderful feeling that felt suspiciously like hope. The following morning dawned clear and bright, typical for early September in Idaho territory. Jessica opened her shop with renewed purpose, arranging hats and greeting customers with genuine warmth for the first time in months. Knowing that Quentin Tucker was working to end Holloway's reign of terror gave her strength. Shortly before noon, the little bell above her door chimed as Quentin entered, now dressed in a clean shirt and vest that accentuated his broad shoulders. "Mr. Tucker," she greeted him with practiced formality for the benefit of Mrs. Henderson, who was examining a selection of ribbons. "Miss Vaughn," he replied with a tip of his hat. "I was wondering if you might be able to repair a tear in my sister's bonnet, the one I purchased yesterday." Jessica recognized the ruse immediately. "Of course. Why don't you bring it by after closing? I'll need to examine the damage properly." Mrs. Henderson clucked her tongue. "Such fine craftsmanship, Jessica dear. Mr. Tucker, you couldn't have chosen a more skilled milliner in all of Idaho." Quentin smiled warmly. "So I've been told. Settlers Creek is fortunate to have her." The compliment brought unexpected color to Jessica's cheeks. "You're both too kind. Now, Mrs. Henderson, will you be taking the blue ribbon or the lavender?" After the customer departed, Quentin lowered his voice. "Holloway's been busy this morning. I've been watching him collect taxes from the livery stable and the apothecary." "He calls it protection money with some of the businesses," Jessica confirmed, adjusting a hat display. "Most pay without question, they're too afraid not to." "I need proof of the blackmail, your case specifically." His green eyes held her steadily. "Does he keep records? The photographs he threatened you with?" Jessica nodded. "He carries a leather portfolio when he comes for collection." "I've seen papers inside, and he mentioned keeping the evidence in his office safe." "That complicates matters," Quentin frowned. Breaking into the sheriff's office with the bell chimed again, cutting off their conversation as Sheriff Holloway himself sauntered in, thumbs hooked in his belt loops. Well, getting friendly with our new visitor, Miss Vaughn." His smile didn't reach his cold eyes. Jessica stiffened. "Mr. Tucker is a customer, Sheriff, nothing more." "Is that so?" Holloway turned to Quentin, sizing him up. "Staying long in our town, Tucker?" "As long as necessary," Quentin replied evenly. "Beautiful country, seems like a place worth investing in." Something shifted in Holloway's expression, greed replacing suspicion. "Investing, you say? What line of business?" "Mining, mostly," Quentin lied smoothly. "Looking for new opportunities. Perhaps we could discuss it sometime." "My office is always open to men of means," Holloway said, his earlier hostility giving way to calculated charm. "Speaking of business." He turned back to Jessica. "I'll be requiring our monthly arrangement today." Jessica swallowed hard. "Of course, Sheriff, I have it ready." She moved to the cash box, removing an envelope containing half of her month's earnings. Her hands shook slightly as she handed it over, avoiding Quentin's gaze, shame burning in her chest. Holloway pocketed the money without counting it. "Always a pleasure, Miss Vaughn." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Tucker, I expect I'll see you soon to discuss those investments." After he left, Jessica gripped the counter to steady herself, mortification making her voice brittle. "Now you've seen it. Satisfied?" Quentin moved closer, his voice a low rumble of controlled anger. "No, Jessica, I'm far from satisfied, but I'm more determined than ever to help you." He reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then thought better of it. "What he's doing, it's not your shame to carry, it's his." "You don't understand," she whispered. "In a town this size, reputation is everything. If people knew about Nathan's debts—" "Your husband's mistakes aren't yours," Quentin said gently. "And a good community would know that." Jessica looked up at him, seeing something in his expression that made her breath catch. Not pity, but understanding, perhaps even admiration. "I've set a plan in motion," he continued, "but I need to know when Holloway typically leaves his office unattended." "Wednesday evenings," she replied without hesitation. He dines with Mayor Perkins every week. Leaves his deputy in charge, but Billy usually sneaks off to see Sarah Wilson at the boarding house. Quentin's lips quirked. Tomorrow, then. In the meantime, act natural. And Jessica. He paused, his expression softening. You're braver than you know. After he left, Jessica touched the spot where the envelope had been, thinking about how much she could have done with that money: repairs to her leaking roof, new inventory, perhaps even a small luxury or two. But more than the money, she realized, she wanted her dignity back. And Quentin Tucker seemed determined to help her reclaim it. The thought warmed her in ways she hadn't expected, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future free from Holloway's shadow. Wednesday evening arrived with agonizing slowness. Jessica closed her shop early, claiming a headache to anyone who inquired. She changed into a darker dress that wouldn't stand out in the twilight and pinned her hair more securely under a plain bonnet. The agreed-upon meeting time was 7 o'clock, behind the abandoned Cooper's shop, 2 blocks from the sheriff's office. As she slipped through the back alleys of Settlers Creek, Jessica's thoughts wandered to Quentin. In just 2 days, he'd become a fixture in her life, dropping by her shop, engaging her in conversation at the general store, even escorting her to Sunday services, all part of their charade, he'd explained, to establish his presence in town and deflect suspicion. But Jessica couldn't help wondering if there might be more to his attentions. The way his eyes lingered on her face when she spoke, how his hand always found the small of her back when they walked together. These gestures felt genuine, stirring feelings she'd thought long buried with Nathan. She reached the Cooper's shop and found Quentin waiting, his tall form nearly invisible in the shadows. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" She moved closer, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I wouldn't have blamed you. This is dangerous, Jessica." She straightened her shoulders. "So is living under Holloway's thumb. What's the plan?" Quentin outlined his strategy. Jessica would create a diversion at the general store, claiming to have seen a suspicious character near the bank. This would draw Deputy Billy from his post, allowing Quentin to slip into the sheriff's office and search for evidence. "And if Holloway returns early from his dinner," Jessica asked, anxiety tightening her chest, "I'll hear him coming. These buildings echo like canyons." Quentin's confidence was reassuring. Besides, Mayor Perkins' wife makes apple pie on Wednesdays. Holloway never leaves until he's had seconds. The unexpected detail made Jessica smile despite her nerves. "How did you learn that?" "Been doing my homework." His eyes crinkled. A good lawman observes everything, especially dessert schedules. Their laughter, hushed though it was, created a moment of intimacy in the gathering dusk. When it faded, Quentin's expression turned serious again. "Jessica, if anything goes wrong, I want you to deny all knowledge of this. Say I manipulated you, forced you, whatever it takes to protect yourself." She shook her head firmly. "I won't do that. We're in this together now." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, then warmth. Before she could interpret it further, he checked his pocket watch. "It's time. Remember, after you alert the deputy, go straight home and stay there. I'll come to you when it's safe." They parted ways, Jessica heading toward the general store while Quentin melted into the shadows between buildings. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it as she burst into Mercer's general store, where several townspeople were still gathered. "Deputy Billy," she cried, summoning genuine-sounding distress. "I just saw a man skulking behind the bank with what looked like tools." "Could be that gang from Boys they've been warning about." The young deputy, eager to prove himself, rushed out immediately, hand on his pistol. "Which direction, Miss Vaughn?" She pointed vaguely toward the opposite end of town from the sheriff's office. "That way, near the livery." As Billy hurried off, Mr. Mercer patted Jessica's shoulder. "You did right to report it, Miss Vaughn. Shall I walk you home?" "No, thank you," she declined, feigning composure. "I believe I'll be fine now that the deputy is aware." She left the store and walked briskly toward her home, fighting the urge to look back toward the sheriff's office where Quentin was now risking everything. The weight of their plan pressed heavily upon her as she entered her darkened house and began the anxious wait. Hours passed. Jessica paced her small parlor, jumping at every sound outside. When a soft knock finally came at her back door, she nearly cried out in relief. She rushed to open it, finding Quentin standing there, his expression grim but triumphant. "I found it," he said as she ushered him inside. "All of it. Ledgers documenting his extortion, letters threatening various townspeople, even confiscated property he's claimed as his own." "And Nathan's debts, the photographs?" she asked hesitantly. Quentin reached into his coat, producing several papers and photographs. "Here, everything he had on you." With trembling hands, Jessica examined the document's promissory notes signed by Nathan, photographs showing him at gambling tables with known criminals, letters from creditors. Her eyes filled with tears, not of shame but release. "This is all of it. You're certain?" Quentin nodded. "I searched thoroughly. There's nothing else he can hold over you, Jessica." Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. After a moment's surprise, his arms encircled her, strong and secure. "Thank you," she whispered against the rough fabric of his shirt. "You've given me my life back." When she finally pulled away, embarrassed by her impulsive embrace, she found Quentin looking at her with an expression that made her heart flutter. His hand rose to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You deserve to be free," he said softly. "But our work isn't done. Holloway has evidence against at least a dozen other townspeople. We need to expose him completely." Jessica straightened, newfound determination flowing through her. "What do we do now? Tomorrow, I meet with Judge Carson in Boise. He's been suspecting corruption in this region for years, but lacked proof. With these documents." He patted his coat where he'd stored the evidence. "Holloway will know his office was searched," Jessica pointed out worriedly. "He'll suspect everyone. Which is why you need to act completely normal tomorrow. Go about your business as usual. I'll return by nightfall with the judge and federal marshals." He took her hands in his. "One more day, Jessica. Can you be brave for one more day?" She nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. One more day. As Quentin prepared to leave, a sudden realization struck Jessica. "When this is over, will you be leaving Settlers Creek?" The thought brought an unexpected pang of loss. He paused at the door, his expression unreadable in the dim lamplight. "That depends," he said finally. "On what?" His eyes met hers, intense and searching. "On whether I have a reason to stay." Before she could respond, he was gone, slipping into the night like a shadow, leaving Jessica with her racing thoughts and a hope she hardly dared acknowledge. Morning arrived with an ominous atmosphere hanging over Settlers Creek. Jessica opened her shop at the usual time, arranging new ribbon displays with hands that only occasionally betrayed her anxiety. When the bell chimed mid-morning, she looked up expecting a customer but found Sheriff Holloway instead, his face a thundercloud of barely contained fury. "Good morning, Sheriff," she greeted him with forced cheerfulness. "What brings you by so early?" His eyes narrowed as he approached the counter, movements deliberate and threatening. "Someone broke into my office last night, Miss Vaughn, went through my private papers." Jessica widened her eyes in feigned surprise. "How dreadful! Was anything taken?" "That's what I'm trying to determine." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Strangely enough, that new friend of yours, Tucker, seems to have left town rather suddenly. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" her heart hammered, but Jessica maintained her composure. "Mr. Tucker mentioned business in boys, I believe. Surely you don't suspect him." "I suspect everyone in this God-forsaken town," Holloway snarled, slamming his palm on the counter. "Especially those who have been seen in his company." Jessica flinched but stood her ground. "Sheriff, I sell hats." Mr. Tucker was a customer, that's all. For a tense moment, Holloway studied her face, searching for deceit. Then, abruptly, he straightened. "If I find out you're involved in this, Jessica, our arrangement will be the least of your worries. I promise you that." After he stormed out, Jessica sank onto her stool, legs suddenly weak. Holloway's threat hung in the air like gunsmoke. All day, she served customers with mechanical politeness, watching the clock crawl toward closing time, praying Quentin would return as promised. By dusk, no word had come. Jessica locked up her shop, anxiety gnawing at her as she walked home through streets that seemed unusually quiet. Several townspeople eyed her suspiciously. Word of Holloway's break-in had spread, and her association with the now absent Quentin had not gone unnoticed. As she approached her house, Jessica noticed a shadow moving near her back door. Fear gripped her until a familiar voice called softly, "It's me." "Quentin." She rushed forward, relief washing over her. "I was worried when you didn't." Her words died as she saw his face in the fading light. A darkening bruise marred his cheekbone, and blood had dried at the corner of his mouth. "What happened?" she gasped, ushering him inside and quickly lighting a lamp. "Ambush on the road back from boys," he explained grimly, wincing as he lowered himself into a chair. "Two of Holloway's men, they were waiting for me." Jessica fetched water and a cloth, gently cleaning his wounds. "The evidence? Safe." He patted his vest. "They didn't get what they were after. But it means Holloway knows we're onto him. The judge is coming with a federal contingent, but they're a day behind me. I couldn't wait, not with you here unprotected." The tenderness in his voice made her pause, her hand hovering near his injured face. "You came back for me," she whispered, understanding dawning. His eyes, despite the pain clouding them, held hers with unwavering intensity. "I will always come back for you, Jessica." The simple declaration hung between them, charged with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Jessica resumed tending his injuries, her touch gentler than necessary. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "Holloway came to the shop today making threats. He suspects something. We need to get you somewhere safe until the judge arrives," Quentin decided, standing with effort. "Pack only what you need. We'll leave within the hour." "Leave? But where would we go?" "Doc Williams has a hunting cabin outside town. He's agreed to help us." Quentin moved to the window, scanning the street warily. "No one will think to look for us there." As Jessica gathered essentials into a small bag, a change of clothes, her mother's locket, the photograph of Nathan, she still kept a peculiar calmness settled over her. For 2 years, she'd existed in a state of suspended animation, first grieving Nathan, then surviving Holloway's tyranny. Now, despite the danger, she felt fully alive again. When she emerged from her bedroom, Quentin was checking his pistol with practiced efficiency. The sight of him, a lawman preparing for battle, should have frightened her. Instead, she felt oddly reassured. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. She nodded, taking one last look at the modest home she'd made for herself. "Ready." They slipped out the back door and through the gardens and alleys of Settlers Creek, avoiding the main streets where Holloway's men might be patrolling. Doc Williams was waiting at the edge of town with a wagon, his weathered face tight with concern. "Sheriff's got half the town looking for you too," he informed them as they climbed aboard. "Claiming you stole from him, Miss Vaughn, and that Tucker here is a wanted man from Colorado." Quentin helped Jessica onto the seat before joining her. Desperate lies from a desperate man. We have proof of his crimes, Doc. The old physician nodded grimly. About time somebody stood up to that snake. The cabin's stocked with enough provisions for a few days. Keep the lamps low at night. They can be seen for miles in these hills. As they set off into the gathering darkness, Jessica found herself pressed against Quentin's side. The rhythm of the wagon and the steady presence of his arm around her shoulders creating a strange bubble of intimacy amid the crisis. "I never thanked you properly," she said after they'd traveled some distance in silence. "For coming to Settlers Creek, for helping me." He looked down at her, his face half illuminated by moonlight. "You don't need to thank me, Jessica. I came here tracking reports of corruption. Finding you was—" He paused, searching for words. "It was unexpected, but I'm grateful it happened." His admission sent warmth spreading through her chest despite the cool night air. "As am I." They reached the cabin well after midnight, a small but sturdy structure nestled in a grove of ponderosa pines. Inside was simple but comfortable: a stone fireplace, a table with chairs, a narrow bed in one corner, and basic cooking implements. "You take the bed," Quentin insisted as he lit the fire. "I'll keep watch from the chair." Jessica wanted to protest, but exhaustion was overtaking her. The emotional toll of the day, coupled with the late hour, left her barely able to keep her eyes open. She removed only her shoes before sinking onto the bed, pulling a worn quilt over herself. From beneath heavy eyelids, she watched Quentin move about the cabin, securing windows, checking sightlines, finally settling into a chair position to view both the door and the bed. His profile in the firelight was strong, determined a sentinel against the dangers that threatened them. "Quentin," she murmured, sleep pulling at her consciousness. "Why did you really come back? The judge could have handled everything." He was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. Then, softly, "Because some things are worth fighting for yourself. Some people, too." As sleep claimed her, Jessica's last thought was that she'd never felt so safe or so understood as she did in this moment, with danger all around and Quentin Tucker standing guard. Morning light filtered through the cabin's small windows, rousing Jessica from the deepest sleep she'd experienced in months. She blinked, momentarily disoriented, before remembering the events that had brought her here. Sitting up, she found Quentin at the table, a cup of coffee before him, studying papers from his leather portfolio. "You're still here," she said, relief evident in her voice. He looked up, a tired smile crossing his face. "Where else would I be? You must have been awake all night." She rose, smoothing her rumpled dress self-consciously. "You need rest, Quentin." "I'll rest when Holloway is behind bars," he replied, though fatigue was evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "The judge should arrive in Settlers Creek by noon. If all goes well, we could return by evening." Jessica moved to the small stove where coffee simmered. "And if it doesn't go well," his expression sobered, "then we may need to consider a more permanent departure from Settlers Creek." The thought struck Jessica with unexpected force. Leave Settlers Creek. The town had been her home since marriage, the place she'd built a life, established her business, buried her husband. Yet as she considered it now, she realized how little truly held her there besides habit and the fear of starting over. "I could do that," she said finally, surprising herself. "Start fresh somewhere else." Quentin's gaze sharpened with interest. "You could come to Denver. The millinery shops there are always seeking skilled hands." Denver. The name conjured images of a bustling city, far removed from the isolation of Settlers Creek. "I've never been to a city that size." "It's growing fast," he acknowledged, "but it has its charms, good people, real opportunity." An awkward silence fell as both recognized the implication of his suggestion. Jessica busied herself preparing a simple breakfast from Doc Williams' Provisions cornbread, and preserves, while Quentin resumed studying his evidence against Holloway. As they ate, Jessica gathered her courage to ask the question that had been lingering in her mind. "This position of yours as a marshal, is it permanent? Do you have a home somewhere?" His eyes met hers across the table. "I have a small ranch outside Denver. Nothing fancy, just enough land for a few horses and some peace and quiet when I'm not on assignment." "It sounds lovely," she said softly, imagining it: open skies, distance from neighbors, the freedom to build something new. "It could be," he agreed, something unspoken but tangible hanging between them. Their moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses. Quentin was on his feet instantly, gun drawn as he moved to the window. "Federal marshals," he confirmed, holstering his weapon. "With Judge Carson. They've come earlier than expected." Relief flooded Jessica as they stepped outside to greet the party: five stern-faced marshals and a distinguished older gentleman who could only be the judge. Introductions were made quickly, and the judge examined the evidence Quentin presented with growing indignation. "This is more extensive than we anticipated, Marshal Tucker," Judge Carson said gravely. "Sheriff Holloway appears to have been running Settlers Creek like his personal fiefdom." "The townspeople deserve justice, Your Honor," Quentin replied. "Miss Vaughn has shown considerable courage in helping expose these crimes." The judge turned kind eyes toward Jessica. "Indeed she has. Rest assured, madam, your contribution will not be forgotten." He turned back to his men. "We ride for Settlers Creek immediately. Marshal Tucker, you and Miss Vaughn will follow with Deputies Wilson and Grant as protection." As the main party departed, Jessica felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. "It's really happening, isn't it? After all these months?" Quentin took her hand, his touch steady and reassuring. "Justice can be slow, Jessica, but it does come eventually. Are you ready to face him one last time?" She squared her shoulders, drawing strength from his confidence. "More than ready." The ride back to Settlers Creek was tense but uneventful. As they approached town, Jessica noticed unusual activity. Townspeople gathered in front of the sheriff's office, voices raised in animated discussion. Word had spread quickly about Judge Carson's arrival and Holloway's impending arrest. Their party dismounted at the edge of the crowd, the two deputy marshals clearing a path for Jessica and Quentin. Faces turned toward them, some curious, others accusatory, a few openly supportive. Jessica held her head high, Quentin's hand at the small of her back providing silent encouragement. Inside the sheriff's office, they found Judge Carson seated behind Holloway's desk, the sheriff himself standing rigidly before him, hands cuffed, face contorted with fury. When he saw Jessica enter with Quentin, his expression darkened further. "You treacherous little—" "That's enough, Holloway," the judge interrupted sharply. "Miss Vaughn is here as a witness to your crimes, which are considerable." He gestured to the documents spread before him. "Extortion, blackmail, theft of property, falsification of records, the list continues." Holloway's eyes narrowed to slits. "She's lying. They both are. I've served this town faithfully for 8 years. You've terrorized it," Jessica corrected, finding her voice at last. "You've stolen from honest people, threatened those who couldn't defend themselves, abused the very law you swore to uphold." A murmur of agreement rose from the townspeople who had crowded in behind them. Jessica recognized faces among them: the apothecary, the blacksmith, the widow Parker, all victims of Holloway's schemes. "The evidence speaks for itself," Judge Carson declared, rising to his feet. "Wyatt Holloway, you are hereby removed from the office of sheriff, effective immediately. You will be transported to Boise to await trial on multiple counts of corruption and abuse of power." As two marshals moved to escort Holloway out, He lunged unexpectedly toward Jessica, his face twisted with hate. "You'll regret this," he spat. "I still have friends who—" Quentin stepped between them, his voice deadly quiet. "You don't have friends, Holloway. You never did. Just people you frightened or manipulated." His hand rested meaningfully on his holster. "And you'll never threaten Miss Vaughn again." Something in Quentin's tone, the absolute certainty of his promise, seemed to finally deflate Holloway's bravado. He allowed himself to be led away, shoulders slumped in defeat. In the aftermath, the office buzzed with activity. Judge Carson appointed a temporary sheriff from among his marshals. Townspeople came forward with additional testimonies against Holloway, and plans were made for a special election to select new leadership. Throughout it all, Jessica remained by Quentin's side, watching as he efficiently coordinated with his fellow lawmen, his professionalism and integrity earning universal respect. Pride welled within her, pride in his accomplishments, in her own courage, in the justice they'd achieved together. As evening approached, the excitement began to wane. Judge Carson departed for Boise with his prisoner, leaving instructions for the remaining marshals. The townspeople gradually dispersed, many stopping to thank Jessica personally for her role in Holloway's downfall. "Seems you're something of a hero, Miss Vaughn," Quentin observed as they finally found themselves alone, walking slowly toward her home in the gathering dusk. "I only did what was necessary," she demurred. "You're the true hero of this story, Quentin." He shook his head. "I was just doing my job." "You were the one with everything to lose." They reached her gate, pausing in the soft glow of twilight. The day's events had left them both exhausted yet exhilarated, standing on the precipice of something neither had fully acknowledged. "Will you be leaving soon?" Jessica asked, the question that had been hovering between them all day. Now that Holloway is captured, Quentin studied her face, his expression unreadable in the fading light. "I've been thinking about that. Judge Carson has offered me a position overseeing law enforcement in this region. It would mean staying in Idaho territory, at least for a while." Hope fluttered in Jessica's chest. "And will you accept?" He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "That depends." "On what?" she asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. His hand rose to gently cup her cheek. "On whether I have a reason to stay, Jessica. A compelling one." Her heart hammering, Jessica summoned her courage once more. "I believe you do, Marshal Tucker." She placed her hand over his. "I believe you have a very good reason indeed." His smile, slow and genuine, transformed his face, erasing the weariness of the past days. With deliberate tenderness, he leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that promised beginnings rather than endings. When they finally parted, breathless and smiling, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you, I'm not an easy man to love. The badge means long absences sometimes, and there's always danger." "And I should warn you," Jessica replied, "that I'm not an easy woman to court." "I value my independence fiercely," he chuckled, the sound warming her from within. "I wouldn't have it any other way." His expression grew serious again. "I don't want to rush you, Jessica. After everything with Holloway, with your husband, you deserve time." She considered his words, appreciating his respect for her circumstances. "Time is precious, Quentin. I've learned that lesson well. But yes, perhaps we should move forward carefully." As they stood together in the deepening evening, Jessica felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The future, once so constricted by Holloway's threats, now stretched before her, full of possibility. And standing beside her was a man who had not only freed her from oppression, but had awakened her heart to love again. In the days that followed, Settlers Creek underwent a transformation. With Holloway's reign of terror ended, townspeople spoke openly about his abuses. supporting one another in healing old wounds. The temporary sheriff, Marshal Davis, proved to be fair and competent, restoring faith in local law enforcement. Jessica's millinery shop flourished as customers returned in greater numbers, many explicitly supporting her for her courage in standing against Holloway. She found herself welcomed into circles that had previously excluded her, though she maintained a healthy skepticism about fair-weather friends. Quentin, true to his word, accepted the regional position Judge Carson offered, establishing an office in Settlers Creek while maintaining oversight of several nearby communities. His duties frequently took him away for days at a time, but he always returned, often appearing at Jessica's shop with small gifts from his travels, unusual ribbons, exotic feathers, once even a book of French fashion plates that left her speechless with delight. Their courtship progressed with deliberate patience. Quentin respected Jessica's need for independence, never presuming upon her affections or time. They dined together when his schedule allowed, attended church services side by side, and gradually became a recognized couple in town, though they maintained propriety that even the most gossipy citizens couldn't fault. One crisp October evening, nearly a month after Holloway's arrest, Quentin invited Jessica for a ride outside town. The aspen trees blazed gold against the deep blue sky as they followed a trail up into the foothills, Jessica riding side saddle on a gentle mare Quentin had selected specifically for her. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked as they climbed higher, the town diminishing behind them. "Somewhere special," he replied mysteriously. "Just a little further." They crested a rise, and Jessica gasped at the vista before them. The valley spread out below, Settlers Creek a collection of toy-sized buildings, surrounded by mountains painted in autumn's glory. The sun hung low in the western sky, casting everything in golden light. "It's beautiful," she breathed, dismounting with Quentin's assistance. "I found this spot my first week here," he explained, tethering the horses before helping her to a flat boulder that formed a natural seat. "I came up here often, thinking about the case, and about you." Jessica glanced at him, noting the unusual solemnity in his expression. "Is everything all right, Quentin?" He took her hands in his touch warm against the cooling air. "Jessica, I received a telegram yesterday, from Denver." Her heart constricted. "Are they calling you back?" "No," he assured her quickly. "But there's a situation with my ranch. The neighbor who's been looking after it is moving on. I need to return, at least temporarily, to make arrangements for its care." He squeezed her hands gently. "I leave in 3 days." "I see." She tried to hide her disappointment. "How long will you be gone?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." Quentin's gaze held hers steadily. "I don't want to leave you, Jessica. These past weeks have been the happiest of my life." "And mine," she admitted softly. He took a deep breath. "I know we agreed to move slowly, and I've respected that, but my feelings for you have only grown stronger with time." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. "I'm not asking you to rush into anything, but I am asking you to consider a future together." Jessica's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring with a small but perfect diamond. "I love you, Jessica Vaughn," Quentin said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love your courage, your determination, your kindness. I love the way you see the world and your place in it. I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife, not immediately, but when you're ready." Tears blurred her vision as she looked from the ring to his earnest face. "Quentin, you could come to Denver with me," he continued. "See the ranch, the city. If you don't like it, we could return here, or go somewhere else entirely. I just want to be where you are." The sincerity in his words touched something deep within Jessica. She thought of all they'd been through together, how he'd risked everything to help her, how he'd never once made her feel diminished or dependent. "Yes," she whispered, then more firmly. "Yes, Quentin, I will marry you." Joy transformed his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that spoke of promises and passion, and a future unfolding before them. As they rode back to town in the gathering dusk, Jessica felt a contentment she hadn't known was possible. The past, with all its pain and struggle, didn't disappear, but it no longer defined her. Ahead lay a new life with a man who valued her strength as much as her softness, who had shown her that love could be liberating rather than constraining. 2 weeks later, after a small but heartfelt wedding ceremony in Settlers Creek's white-steepled church, Jessica and Quentin Tucker departed for Denver. She had sold her millinery shop to eager buyers but packed her most precious tools and materials, determined to establish a new business in their new home. The ranch, when they finally arrived after days of travel, exceeded Jessica's expectations. Nestled in rolling hills with views of distant mountains, the modest house and surrounding acres offered both privacy and possibility. As Quentin showed her around, his pride evident in every gesture, Jessica envisioned the life they would build together, children running across the meadows, evenings spent on the wide porch watching the sunset, a small workshop where she could create her hats while remaining close to home. "Do you think you could be happy here?" Quentin asked as they stood together on that porch, his arm around her waist. Jessica leaned into his embrace, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I already am." In the years that followed, their happiness only deepened. Quentin continued his work with the Marshal's service, but arranged his duties to keep him closer to home. Jessica established a successful millinery business in Denver, her designs sought after by the city's most fashionable ladies. Their family grew with the birth of 2 sons, Nathan, named in respectful memory of Jessica's first husband, and William, after Quentin's father. Later came a daughter, Elizabeth, who inherited her mother's creativity and her father's determination. The past was not forgotten. Jessica kept a small photograph of Nathan tucked away, and occasionally spoke of him to their children, ensuring his memory was honored without overshadowing their present joy. Quentin supported this with the same understanding he'd shown from the beginning, secure in the knowledge that Jessica's heart, while capable of remembering past love, belonged fully to him now. News occasionally reached them from Settlers Creek. The town prospered under more honest leadership, and Holloway served a lengthy sentence for his crimes. When his eventual release was reported, neither Jessica nor Quentin felt any lingering fear that chapter of their lives was firmly closed. On their 20th anniversary, as they sat together on their porch watching their nearly grown children tend to evening chores, Jessica turned to Quentin, her hand finding his with the familiarity of 2 decades' companionship. "You ever think about how we met?" she asked. "How different our lives might have been if you hadn't come to Settlers Creek that day." Quentin brought her hand to his lips, kissing the gold band that had never left her finger. "I think fate would have found another way to bring us together. Some things are simply meant to be." As the Idaho sun set on their memories and the Colorado stars illuminated their present, Jessica knew he was right. Their journey from corruption and blackmail to justice and love had forged a bond that neither time nor distance could have prevented. In the end, it wasn't just that a cowboy had exposed a corrupt lawman's crimes. It was that in doing so, he had uncovered the most precious truth of all, that even in the wild territories of the American West, where danger and opportunity walked hand in hand, love could take root and flourish, transforming 2 separate paths into one shared journey that would last a lifetime.